Yeah, we're going to start right now. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second of SBA and the Stony Brook Small Business Development Center. We're very fortunate. First of all, before we start, I want to make sure everyone's safe, your families are safe, everyone's doing social distancing, and we will get through this. We will get through this together, and we will get through this as a community. We are very fortunate to have with us Robert Pachota from the Small Business Association. He's the manager of the Long Island, and Bernie Ryber from Stony Brook Small Business Development Center. Both are extremely knowledgeable. They've been helping us. They've been dealing with a lot of people over the last couple of weeks. But before we do that, I am going to introduce the president of the HIA-LI, Terry Elise Maselli, who will give a few comments, and then we'll go to Robert, and we'll go to Bernie.
Oh, thanks, Anthony. And, you know, as Anthony said, I hope through all this, what's top of our mind is staying healthy, staying safe, staying mentally healthy. And yesterday was a great example of how you could get outside and just walk around the block and get some air and breathe some good air in. So again, you stay mentally healthy as well as physically healthy. But you know, stay at home, obviously, right? And wear that face mask, things like that. I hope you're getting our updates. I mean, we're really attempting at all levels to send out information on the state, on the county, for the hospitals, now for the police department. So I hope you're getting all of that. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are delighted really to have both Robert and Bernie, who in a normal world just work and fight for the small businesses, but in this situation are doing even more so. So again, we wanted to give an update based on what they did last week. So I'm going to turn it back to Anthony to start the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let me, we'll start with you, Robert, first. I would just give a little, like you did last week, tell everyone a little bit about what you're doing right now, your position, and then we'll jump into it. Oh, by the way, this is being recorded for people who could not make the call. And also, if you have a question, please send me something over chat, and I'll ask the question to both Robert and Bernie.
Thanks, Anthony. I'll be brief because this whole process has evolved into more of a Q&A need than really, hey, here's what we're going to do for you, because we're recognizing that the process is morphing literally as we speak. You know, Davida, our administrator, got on a couple of news sources and talked about this lending. So far, $34 billion have been committed to small business since this whole process started. But to those of you listening and to the people that you help, that it really doesn't amount to a hill of beans, because you're all thinking, you know, where's my money? Where's my application? Where's my bank that's available? So that's kind of the stage we're in. But I got to say, I'm going to try to share the screen with you. Can you all see that PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
now, yes.
So very briefly, and really the man with a plan and the process really is Bernie, and of course his counterpart over at Farmingdale, Erica Chase. The SBDCs really are the go-to people. And when people call me, I'll address the question, and people think because they're talking to an SBA branch office manager that I'll know something that maybe the SBDCs won't know. In general, that's not true. Any information I get, I share with them, and quite often through the process of helping clients, they're actually coming up to greater truths than I would have offered from the mountaintop. So don't hesitate to sort of stick close to these folks. But this is the EIDL application site. It's the one thing I really want to get across to you here is the questions I get all the time is, can I apply to both? And the answer really is yes, you can. You just can't double dip. And Bernie will go into this more in detail, but think about this. The EIDL is designed to preserve the business, you know, pay down the debts that you can't put off, the costs such as, you know, maybe some payroll, but think about it more like the rent, utilities. accounts payable, and things that you just got to pay in order to stay viable through this whole process is done. And that's think about EIDL that way. Yes, you can use it for payroll as well. However, there's also this PPP, which is fairly new, and people get a little bit anxious about it because maybe the bank has put them on a holding pattern, or maybe they don't even have a bank because they can't find one that will take their application, given they don't have a ongoing relationship. That will improve, but the EIDL is still vibrant, still available. I highly recommend people apply. I won't go into that again. You know my feelings on this. Just get on the dance floor. But one thing that has changed, I think, since our last call, and that is the advance is totally forgivable. So if you are going to check off the box, if you've reapplied or you've applied recently, where that's an option, check that you want the advance, and that is forgivable. And that will be determined what your advance is going to be based on, in essence, the number of employees you have. So I think you'd be remiss if you didn't at least investigate that. If you haven't already, I'm sure everybody on this call has. And then there's this other site, if you can see this below, and that's the PPP borrower application form. And this may change and morph a little bit as we keep on going, because the banks are running with this. I had somebody, actually two people come by my office yesterday, through the glass, wanting to hand me their application. The lenders are going to be handling this, and they'll define how they're going to do that, whether it be in person or virtually. But I highly recommend you that are on here, please print the form out. There's a lot of answers to questions that I get all the time, and that's okay. I didn't realize most of the information was on the back of the form, page 3. How do you compute your compensation? What time frames do you utilize for that? What can you use the funds for where you maintain your forgiveness? So print the form out, literally spend 5 minutes going over and highlighting page 3. It'll be well worth the effort. And of course, the customer service number is on the bottom of the screen. We've had challenges with that as well. We put a bunch of people on staff. They are answering it like maybe a 5-minute wait. Sometimes the answers aren't always like you would get from Bernie's staff or from me, but give them a shot. You should be able to check. Now, the other question is, where do I find the status of my application? If it's idle, you should get a response by email within about 4 to 5 days. But you got to maintain diligence. And if you don't get it, call the 800 number or get with the SBDCs or myself, and we'll get you to a better answer. The advance on paper says that once they receive it, that you should get the advance in the bank account within 3 days. I find that rather lofty goal, but that's what they're going with. So just again, for your benefit and for those that you coach, I thought I'd share that. This is all, you know, the PPP, the website's pretty good about, and by the way, the Department of Treasury website has a great host of PDFs that you can go to get really pretty good information as well. Maybe even organized equally well, maybe a little bit better than the SBA's, but we're getting there. And lastly, the site you see here is the Paycheck Protection Find. That website is constantly changing and improving and populated. So as banks come on board and their status comes on board, then you should find assistance when it comes to finding a lender if you haven't found one already. So at this point, I'll stop. It's more important about your Q&A, but it's really more important about Mr. Bernie Ryba. He is the man, the myth, the legend, and he's the guy with all the answers. So Dr. Ryba, if you would.
Thank you, Rob, for those kind and effusive comments. And thank you, Anthony, and good morning, everyone. Appreciate once again the opportunity. I would first like to bring to your attention where we stand nationally from a macro perspective and then review the local response and the 2 federal programs currently in place. From a macro perspective, there's good news and there's bad news. First, the bad news. There's a developing consensus in Washington that the CARES Act, $2.2 trillion, is not going to be sufficient. There are growing signs in the economy that it's deteriorating faster than expected. The unemployment rate is not 4.4%. According to former Federal Reserve Chairman Janet Yellen, it's probably 13%. And new jobless claims for this week, likely to exceed the 6.6 million that we experienced last week. Goldman Sachs predicts that the federal budget deficit will now be $3.7 trillion. As recently as a couple of months ago, that estimate was $1 trillion. Put that in perspective. The government takes in $3 trillion in revenues. It was forecasted to spend $4 trillion in expenses. Now it's forecast to spend $7 trillion in expenses. That's where we arrive at a deficit of $3.7 trillion. Remarkable, given the dollars that we're dealing with here. We've also been reading, and the expectation is that the Payroll Protection Program is expected to be depleted before June 30th, according to the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, Senator Marco Rubio. So what's the good news? The good news is that there's a growing number of congressional legislators, Republicans and Democrats, who feel that there has to be an expansion of the $350 billion Payroll Protection Program. Yesterday, the Bank of America stepped up, received 178,000 applications for the Payroll Protection Program, totaling $32.9 billion. And if you do the math, that's almost 10% of the $350 billion, just the responsibility of the Bank of America. Further good news is that the leaders of the government, House Speaker Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader McConnell, and of course the President agree that there should be a CARES 2 Act, which would be similar in size to the CARES Act, which is $2.2 trillion. And finally, this morning I read that the Federal Reserve has agreed to purchase payroll protection loans from the banks in order to eliminate the bank's exposure to these bad loans, which should result in banks being more willing to accept and approve more PPP applications. So that's the good and the bad news from a macro perspective. What are we doing from a local perspective, and how are the 2 federal programs developing that are currently in place? Stony Brook has seen a tremendous surge in appointments. We've counseled over 100 clients in the past 2 weeks, plus there are 100 plus clients waiting to be counseled. My anticipation is that the surge for SBDC services will continue for the foreseeable future. So how will we address that? First, as I mentioned last week, Empire State Development has provided a grant to the New York State SBDC network of $2.3 million. That will be formally approved later on in the month. We should receive those monies by the end of the month. We'll be able to add 1 additional advisor plus 1 part-time support staff. Secondly, I have initiated discussions with the Stony Brook School of Business. I have a Zoom meeting with them right after this meeting. We're in discussions in order to identify graduate business students to be trained to help us provide targeted business advisement for the more simplistic applications. Third, the CARES Act. The CARES Act provides for $240 billion of funding for SBDCs and women's business centers. We've learned that 11 million of that has been earmarked for New York State, and I'm guessing that between the Farmingdale SBDC and the Stony Brook Center, that about 10 new advisors will be retained for at least 1 year. My expectation is, our expectation is we should be receiving those monies in about 2 to 2.5 months. So now let me briefly review the two main programs and comment on how the programs stand to date. There are 3 buckets of money that we're dealing with here. First, there's the $50 billion bucket for the Economic Disaster Loan. The acronym there is EIDL, E-I-D-L. Associated with that bucket is a $10 billion bucket for the $10,000 advance program. And then the third and the largest bucket is the $350 billion bucket for the Payroll Protection Program as part of the CARES Act. As of the close of business last night, I heard, according to President Trump, that about $40 billion had been approved for disbursement among all these 3 programs. My back of the envelope calculation that perhaps 15 to 25% of small businesses will be able to take advantage of these programs, and that obviously not all the businesses, small businesses in the country will be able to participate, which lends further support for my anticipation based upon recent conversations that there will be an expansion of this program. So my observations personally are as follows. At this time, there's a finite amount of money with no guarantee that more relief will be forthcoming. So my recommendation would be to apply as soon as possible. There is no benefit to delaying and waiting for the banks when you deal with the PPP loan or the SBA, who is responsible for the EIDL application, to settle into their new roles for processing these applications without some sort of hiccups along the way. So apply as soon as possible, because at this point in time, there's a finite amount of money. Secondly, individually, you may ask a question about one of these programs more than once and get different answers depending upon who you speak to. I don't think that's particularly unusual because of the degree of detail that we're dealing with here, and also because these programs have been introduced so near term. Both the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and the Payroll Protection Program have certainly evolved since they were initially introduced. EIDL about 3 weeks ago. Payroll Protection Program applications opened on April 3rd. So I think it's typical for any large government program that has a rushed introduction due to an imminent crisis. So for example, for the EIDL program, we've changed the application process. The initial one was more demanding. The initial one didn't address the $10,000 grant. Now we have a new streamlined form. You check the box for the $10,000. It's been improved. For the PPP loan, terms are supposed to be up to 4% interest rate for a maximum term of 10 years. When the SBA issued the interim financial rule late last Thursday afternoon, 1 day before the initial date of the applications, which was April 3rd, that was suddenly changed from a term of 10 years to 2 years, suddenly changed from an interest rate of 4% to an interest rate of 1%. Plus, there have been other changes and clarifications as well that I won't go into. Third, for the PPP loan, not all banks were ready to accept applications, as we now know, on Friday, April 3rd. And banks may have different approaches to how they may accept applications, from a range of the best situation. You do all your business banking with one lender, which is participating in the program, all the way to the worst situation. You do all your banking with a small community bank that is not participating in the program. So how do you address possibly the worst situation? Possible solution is to become aware of the large online lenders that are in the business world. The three top ones, Newtek, Live Oak, Celtic Bank, were the largest SBA lenders in the country last year, responsible for $667 million of SBA loans, and are actively, anxiously looking for new accounts. So that's one suggestion. Another suggestion is if your bank is SBA certified and is not yet accepting PPP applications because they're having trouble with their system, I would at least request to be placed on their waiting list. So let me briefly go over the loan specifics and then make some observations regarding the PPP application process. For the EIDL product, again, up to $2 million, term up to 30 years. This is handled by the SBA. They're the ones that determine the length of the obligation. The interest rate is 3.75% for for-profit companies, 2.75% for not-for-profit companies. Less than 500 employees, and if the loan is approved for less than $200,000, there are no guarantees or collateral that is required. The application time to apply can be until December 20th, 2020. And as Rob has mentioned, these monies are to be used for accounts payable, debts that are fixed from month to month that would have been paid if not for COVID-19. So the SBA is responsible for this, review and approves the loan application. And as I learned some time ago, the initial distribution after the loan is approved and closed is approximately 5 days after the close, where you would get your first installment of $25,000. For the Payroll Protection Program, the SBA approved lenders are the ones that have been called to action here to receive the application, and you can apply anytime up to June 30th. You can borrow up to $10 million. Now it's a 2-year term with a 1% interest rate. The intent is to use most proceeds to pay 8 weeks of payroll from the close of the loan subsequent for the next 8 weeks. These monies can also be used to pay interest on mortgage, rent, health insurance premiums, and utilities. Unique feature of this particular product is the loan forgiveness aspect, where hopefully 75% or more is used for employee payroll. So we know that there's a 2-page simple online application which may be used in order to initially apply. I have received an example from a local regional CPA firm of the kinds of support that you may be required to provide to the lender in order to be approved for the PPP loan, which would include copies of payroll tax reports filed with the IRS, copies of payroll reports for each pay period for the preceding 12 months, documentation reflecting the health insurance premiums paid by the company, and documentation of all retirement plan funding by the employer. So that's the easy part. The harder part would be when you put in for the forgiveness. The forgiveness is more demanding because then they're coming up with 75% or more that is transitioning into a grant. So the following may be expected to be provided to the lender in order to submit to the federal government in order to be approved for forgiveness. Once again, copies of payroll tax reports on file with the IRS, copies of payroll reports for each pay period for the 8-week period of the Payroll Protection Program, documentation reflecting the health insurance premiums paid by the company during that period, documentation of all retirement plan funding for the 8-week period, copies of all lease agreements for real estate, copies of all statement of interest paid on debt obligations, and copies of canceled checks, statements, and other evidence of utilities paid during the 8-week period of time. So that's why I recommended last week at this time, keeping these PPP monies in a separate new bank checking account so that you don't mix them up with these funds with your regular operating account. So it's easier for you to specifically identify and provide the supporting documentation. So at this point, that's the overview that I wanted to provide. That's basically where we stand today as best that I can determine. And now I'd like to turn it over to Rob and Anthony for any further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Rob, it's on mute. Now he's unmuted.
Well, at this point, Anthony, it's your show. I mean, you have both of us here. A couple of questions are in the chat room. I'll let you.
We have a bunch of questions. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll let you go through them based on your ability, and hopefully we can figure out some answers to them.
Yeah. Well, some of them I don't know if you have the answers to, but I'll ask them anyway. So there's roughly 30 million small businesses in the country. How is the program going to be funded if there's not enough money? Is it a first come, first serve type of application?
That is my understanding. First serve, first come, first serve. So that's why it's so important in order to apply as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead, Terry.
Anthony, just let me chime in, because a big question, gentlemen, that we've been getting from our membership, again, small businesses, is they're a little confused about the 10K advance and the PPP. So we know the PPP, they know can be used for that 8-week period, as Bernie, you said, in payroll. But when you get that 10K, does it go all into one pot in terms of forgiveness, or how does that work?
That's my understanding, Terry, that the 10K, if you get the PPP loan, that the 10K is taken up in the forgiveness calculation as well. So if you don't get the PPP, there's no way you're going to pay that money back. But according to the calculation details that I've reviewed, the $10,000 would be rolled into the forgiveness calculation when you look at how those PPP monies were spent as well.
So that can go well beyond then 8 weeks in payroll. Am I correct? If you put the 10,000 in there, it would be the 8 weeks for the PPP and then potentially a portion of an additional payroll?
That's an interesting question. I haven't seen a fact pattern like that in order to address, how that would be handled. My guess is that you would have that flexibility. My expectation is that if people needed that $10,000 on the spur of the moment, that by the time they got the PPP, or most of that might have been spent already, rather than spending it during the time that you have the PPP loan.
Right.
If I could just add,
Thank you.
If we use this $10,000 number, it's up to $10,000. So everybody's not going to get a check for $10,000 if you apply for the EIDL. It's based on the configuration of your labor force. There's a factor they'll go through, and it is just it's going to go towards whatever the full EIDL comes out to be. But the advance is totally forgivable. The challenge here we're facing is these timelines. What if we are stuck behind closed doors beyond a certain point in time? The guidelines are basically just that, guidelines. The intent really is to get money out. It's not like a commercial loan where they're going to try to catch you with like sort of missing a possible opportunity. Obviously, you want to make sure you're not fraudulent. For instance, when you apply for the PPP, you must check off a number of boxes certifying that these funds are going to be earmarked for certain things. So you can't just take it and use it for the wrong reason. But The other thing I want to mention, and it's in the literature, but theoretically, you could use the proceeds from the PPP to help you pay down what's payments remaining on the EIDL. So there, I don't want to go into great detail on this, but you can use them somewhat for the same, to help each other out, provided they're not all going to pay the salary of John and Jane. You know, it can't be double dipping. I know it's kind of confusing, but there is some flexibility.
Okay, thank you. Have you heard of any loan forgiveness will become taxable income for either the federal or state?
I have received a answer to a question regarding the $10,000 loan advance. And based upon the response from the SBA officer, it is expected that the $10,000 loan advance will not be taxable. I have not come across anything regarding the loan forgiveness portion of the PPP. So I can't.
Bear in mind, these payouts are not going into a business owner's pocket. They're either, it's passed through to the employee or to pay some debt. So it's not like you're going to go to Aruba with the advance money. It's I think keep that in mind. This is money you're getting to keep your business going the right direction, to pay for legitimate costs and expenses.
Right. So this question is coming from the Diocese of Rockville Center. Do you know if each parish stands on its own, or do they take into account the entire diocese and consider it a single employer?
Normally, there are affiliation rules whereby if a parent company controls several companies and the total of those companies exceeds the 500 employees, that it would be precluded from an SBA loan program. Affiliation rules have been relaxed for, say, like hotels. In the example of hotels, if you're a franchisee for a Hilton property, your property has a couple of hundred employees. Because of that, and because of the Hilton having hundreds of thousands of employees, possibly in the United States, those rules have been waived for hotels. Possibly, it would make sense that the affiliation rules have been waived for churches as well. But I haven't run across that specifically, but to me, it would make sense.
Okay. Can a 1099 employee apply for the EIDL, and are they eligible for the 10,000?
Rob, you want to handle that one?
Anthony, say that again. I'm sorry.
You were asked this, I think, last week. Can a 1099 employee apply for the EIDL, and are they eligible for the 10,000?
Yes. If you're self-employed, you are eligible. And by the way, 1099 for the PPP and self-employed contractors, et cetera, or small people, small businesses like 1099s can apply for the PPP effective. The date is for this coming Friday, the 10th. So that's when the window's up. I know there's been challenge so far with people applying since last Friday, but that's the time frame for the PPP entry.
Okay. This is coming from a small business. If my small business gets a PPP loan on June 1st, will I have 60 days to hire back my employees and pay rent and have the loan forgiven? Or there is a hard deadline of June 30th to spend the money?
The deadline to apply for the PPP is, as you've mentioned, June 30th. But the 8-week period can be beyond the June 30th. So the June 30th date is not relevant to the 8 weeks that you have to spend the money subsequent to the close of the PPP loan.
Okay. For the purposes of determining whether a business is under 500 employees, when is the measuring date if the business tends to hover around 500 employees?
It would be my expectation, I haven't seen the answer to this question, that at the time, perhaps at the time of application, perhaps at the time that the loan closes. To me, those would be the two most logical dates.
Okay.
It seems like a magical date. They're going back on is February 15th, 2019. That would be my guess, but I don't want to go, and we can find out for you.
Okay. When do you start paying back the PPP loan?
Interest on the PPP loan accrues during the period of the entire 2020. The PPP loan, after the forgiveness is taken into account, starts to be repaid at the beginning of 2021. So at that point in time, it's a 2-year loan with an interest rate of 1%. So during the months leading up to that, there's a deferment of the loan payment.
Okay. Does the PPP loan amount calculation include or not include compensation by a company to independent contractors?
It definitely does not.
Okay. So to be clear, disaster loan assistance application is coming directly from the government through the SBA, and the PPP loan must go through a private approved lender.
Correct.
Okay. Does the employer have to restore salaries back to what they were as part of the forgiveness of the PPP loan? Some companies had cut salaries during this COVID time.
Rob, you may want to participate in this, but I believe that the company does have some flexibility on this. It would be to the company's benefit in order to provide for the full salary, because then it is caught up in forgiveness, and then the remaining amount doesn't become a loan as of January of 2021. So also there's a thought that 75% of these monies should be provided in order for to provide for employee salaries. Rob, you may want to mention something as well from your perspective.
I think that's rather accurate. I mean, obviously the intent is to restore these people back where they were when they were forced to either get a pay cut or leave the company. The big aha moment here is there's going to be some in terms of factoring your compensation. The highest salary can only be $100,000. So there is a cap. And then obviously for some of the principals, when they're factoring what the loan amount's going to be by doing the math, they can only count their own salary as max of $100,000.
Okay.
Keep in mind also that the SBA is interested in the money going out to the employees. Whether those employees actually have to do some work, or if the business is in hiatus, it's being postponed because of what we're going through here, doesn't play a part in the distribution of these funds.
PPP, when calculating the average monthly payroll, do you include other payroll costs such as company paid medical insurance?
Yes.
And I know, Rob, you've answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway because someone's asking it. Is my understanding is that we could either apply for the PPP or the EIDL, or should we do both?
Rob?
I think, as we've all stated, I do recommend people apply for both. You can always, again, this might be a different group on here, but you don't have to take the EIDL. There is a processing time frame, so I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to at least get the process started. And then as things percolate up regarding details with PPP, if it makes sense to take the EIDL or say, you know what, I'll pass on that. But for no other reason, I'd apply for the EIDL as a minimum for the advanced possibility, but you can apply for both. Yes.
Okay. If my firm hires more employees once I get the PPP funds than I had in 2019, can I use the funds to pay their salaries and get those funds forgiven too?
It's my understanding that, you know, if your payroll is as of February 15th, Rob, does that date ring a bell?
Yes.
That would be the number of employees that would be caught up in this program.
So again, on this, the forms, I mean, it's you need like a set of reading glasses to read it. But in order, you try to calculate your average monthly payroll for 2019, starting at February 15th to June 30th. And there's some flexibility if you're seasonal. So but you can't, the whole point here is to get you whole. You can't put on more people than you had when you started and then expect, you know, more money to come or more to be forgiven. It's largely to get you back where you were before this mess started.
Okay. So to confirm, we should include our 1099 independent contractors in the PP loan request.
No. It's not what I had said about 5 minutes ago. Independent contractors are not part of this calculation.
Okay.
They would file themselves.
They would file for their own relief on their own. Yes.
After applying for the PPP, can you make any changes on the application?
There's going to be
That
dialogue.
one before. You know, this is so early in the process. I would imagine that there is some flexibility. Rob, you may want to speak to this as well.
I think that there will be flexibility. So it's pretty much exactly as Bernie outlined.
Okay. This is coming from a business owner. For a business owner that does not usually get salary, only distributions, it's my understanding that they qualify for inclusion in determining the maximum loan amount under the PPP up to $100,000. But what evidence of such distribution is required for the purpose of the loan forgiveness? Is the portion of loan forgivable?
This is going to be a question for the lender, but it's based on payroll data. So I heard the same question yesterday, which is it is a very good question. The owner is taking a draw, same kind of concept. Mm-hmm. So if you're not on the payroll, then theoretically that should not be counted as part of the PPP calculations, unless the lender has a proviso to let you offer a sort of a separate calculation.
Okay. If a business owner owns more than one business and each business qualified for the respective EIDL and PPP, can each business apply for both loans independently?
That is my understanding. Correct.
Okay. And that is all the questions I have right now, believe it or not.
Okay.
Wait, they're firing some more in on me.
You spoke too soon.
I spoke too soon. On March 30th, I completed the EIDL application and requested the $10,000 up front. How long does it take to get that money? Now, when I apply for PPP loan, do I indicate that I got the dollars?
Anthony, that's a timely question. I was corresponding with one of my advisors about a half hour before this call. She had sent me an email last night indicating that one of her clients had reached out to the SBA call center saying that he had applied for the EIDL on March 31st. And when could he expect the $10,000? And he had used the streamlined application.
Okay.
Particular individual at the help desk indicated that those applications up through March 31st were not ones that apparently, for some apparent reason, were not going to be addressed. And that he recommended that even though they applied through the streamlined form, to reapply. So I responded to my advisor early yesterday evening that that didn't sound right to me, okay, that the streamlined form should be applicable in order to be processed. So they called back again early this morning, got someone else. The response was the same, that the person was reading from a listing of answers to questions on these sheet of anticipated issues. So my answer to this is that if you have applied based upon the most recent information that I have obtained up through March 31st, reapply using the streamlined form, put in again for the $10,000 advance by checking the box. Don't take any chances. This is 2 times that the SBA has indicated that up through March 31st, the applications, for whatever reason, are not going to be accepted. So that would be my answer to this question.
Okay. This is coming from someone who's obviously their business is closed right now. Can you apply for the PPP loan and schedule to take down the funds in the future once we are allowed to open our business?
The provisions of the program indicate that once the loan closes and you receive the funds, that those funds are to be used for the subsequent 8 weeks. So there is no delay in holding the funds 8 weeks in order to apply them subsequently.
Okay.
That's your understanding?
Yes.
I know that we can include medical insurance on the PPP. Can we also include 401k company match?
Absolutely.
The company match.
Let's see. I have a business and self-rental real estate company. Can I apply EIDL for both companies?
What 2 companies does he have again?
He says he has a business, so that's one company, and he also has a self-rental real estate company. Can I apply EIDL for both companies?
My expectation would be correct. He can.
Okay. And, all right. Well, I've gone through all the questions. I just want to let everyone know that after this call is being recorded, we will send out the audio of the call. We also will send out, like we did last week, the information facts that Rob gave us as far as websites and phone numbers that people can reach out and contact. The Stony Brook Small Business does have has an email address. You can send questions into that email. So we will give all that information. I'm going to ask Bernie, Rob, and then Terry if you want to make any closing comments.
Well, the only closing comments I would like to make is that to reiterate that it's just so important to apply for this as soon as possible. There's a real surge here. Most of us are used to getting, excellent service when we deal with municipalities at all levels. Because of the surge of applications here, There's going to be some wait. There's going to be some extensive wait times when it comes to the lenders. My advice to you is just be patient. There's such a surge. It is so important to your business to get in the queue ASAP to get the money as soon as possible. There is no benefit to wait for another week. There's no benefit to wait for the next program. Maybe there's a doubling down and what have you. Apply now, get it out of the way, and feel that you've done as much as you can up to this point in order to provide for the financial security of your business.
Robert?
Listen, folks, just stay positive. The fact that you're on here, everybody that's on this call right now tells me that you are diligent. You're going to be on top of this thing. You will survive and you will thrive. I do believe this is our finest hour. Not only, I mean, it stinks what's going on personally and professionally, but we're going to come out of this a whole lot smarter and a whole lot more robust. Some will not flourish, but the group on here will, and hopefully those that choose to flock to groups like HIA-LI will be a lot stronger in weathering the storm. So kudos to all. You reach out anytime you want. I'm available through Anthony Terry or directly. You have my information.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I think we might have lost Terry. I think we did. Anyway, I want to thank both of you. I want to thank everyone for being on the call. Like I said, we will be sending out this recording. We will be sending out other information for you to reach out to. And also, as Robert and Bernie said, I am here. You can reach out to me directly through email with any questions you may have, and we'll direct it to the right person. So thank you again for joining. And be safe and continue to social distance.
Thank you, Anthony. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
You can.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.